Cindy Sherman. Born in 1954 from New Jersey, Cindy Sherman is an American photographer who is widely known for all her self-portrait photography work from around the 1970s right up to the present day. Originally, she began with drawing, painting, and photography until 1976, when she was 22, she decided to pursue her career exclusively in photography. A year later, in 1977, Sherman began producing one of her most popular series of photos to date, which was known as the Untitled Film Stills. This contained around 69 black and white self-portrait photography works, which she took between 1977 and 1980. The book Cindy Sherman, The Complete Untitled Film Stills, covers this series in detail, explaining that the only reason the series ended was because she ran out of cliché ideas to execute. Within the concepts she did make, she recreated all sorts of female stereotypes from films, adverts, and TV. These pieces of work critiqued identity and gender, and in these photographs she wore different outfits and costumes, portraying loads of unidentified characters. In terms of different shooting locations, lots of the photos were taken inside of her kitchen and lots of outdoor spaces. Sherman's work stood out because in the time when she took her earlier photographs, they were fresh new ideas that she didn't base off anything particular, and they were just concepts she wanted to experiment with. A lot of other photographs from other artists didn't stand out as much because they all tried to focus on popular culture and trends, resulting in all of their works being fairly similar. Cindy Sherman's work has been on display in a number of places, including the National Portrait Gallery and the Museum of Modern Art. The book Cindy Sherman by Ava Respini includes a quote on page 74 where Sherman states who some of her influences were for her earlier works, and one of them happened to be famous pop artist Andy Warhol. As mentioned in this quote right here, definitely Warhol early on. More recently, Sherman opened her Instagram account to the public in 2017, which currently features more colourful pieces and a consistent range of distorted head portraits. Being a contemporary photographer, she's very relevant in today's society as she represents current circumstances, and they are seen all through her concepts. Even though there is a clear difference between the image styles of her works throughout the years, people can still relate to their work as they all convey the same message. Sherman states in an interview posted on The Guardian that the context behind her dressing up was to overcome shyness and hide elements of her true self by replacing it with individual characters that had their own unique story. This is just the same with people on social media today, as a lot are presenting themselves on Instagram, exaggerating their identities while putting on an act. Sherman, while talking about her pictures, quotes this: "Yes, quite often I will do something and think, oh no, she looks a little too much like me. I have tried to learn not to be afraid of that when that happens. I'm not trying to obliterate myself and completely hide within the images like I used to. I'm a little more comfortable now and letting parts of myself show through." This basically tells us that you're able to present characters and made up identities, but you shouldn't also be afraid to show your actual identity and yourself, as both tell a big story in themselves, and no one knows your story better than you, and you shouldn't be, afraid to present it. I chose to discuss Cindy Sherman for a few reasons, mainly because of how much I love her Untitled Film Still series and her explanation behind the construction of each piece. She states, "I want there to be hints of narrative everywhere in the image so that people can make up their own stories about them. This is both interesting and creative, as the filmic style of her pieces allow you to picture the scenes both before and after the recorded shot, and you have so many opportunities for different conclusions based on all the elements that are shown in each of her shots. And therefore, with all this in mind, you end up seeing her still picture as a moving image." To use an example, Untitled Film Still number 48 displays a solitary figure played by Sherman with a suitcase beside her on a main road looking out towards the horizon. This scene could be portraying a number of scenarios, such as the character reflecting on an experience she had at a place she'd just been to, or even her running away from home, hence her having the suitcase beside her. The character's pose with her arms behind her back could be suggesting that she's comfortably waiting for somebody to pick her up. And the fact that you can't see her face and the fact it's obscured means she might be happy or upset at the fact that she's waiting. I personally like that her work is able to do this, as there ends up being so much more to look at due to the power of the imagination, and this makes a lot of the images timeless. In terms of visual techniques in this image, this piece features several leading lines pointing to the viewer to where all the action is happening. The horizon is positioned on the dead centre of the composition, creating a nice view. Sherman is placed within the left third at the intersecting point of the lines. There is a good balance with the volume of grey and black that is used, and the model shirt being the only crisp white element in the image really makes her eye-catching and stand out. This, and the help of leading lines, allows her to be the first thing the viewer lays eyes on when they read the image. Depending what the viewer has experienced in life will determine how they see her pictures. These are semiotics, which elements and codes used in the image have to be received by people who are familiar with them. For instance, Untitled Film Still 11 features Sherman portraying a character lying on a bed in the missionary position, which is something you'd notice as an adult, but not so much as a child. Though when you're looking at this image from a child's perspective, they'd be more interested in the fact that she's lying in an unconventional way in bed, being upside down, as that's, to them, an unusual way of lying in bed. And in terms of visual elements used in this picture, the composition contains symmetry, with the bed taking up the majority of the frame placed directly in the centre. The upper third features a line of detail made up by the bedside tables and pillows, which looks a little busier in comparison to the middle horizontal third. The model is positioned at a perfect 45-degree angle from the top right of the frame to the bottom left, crossing 2 points where the rule of thirds lines intersect. Line and shape really make this piece stand out, as they appear large and significant due to the amount of space that's taken up by them. You're originally drawn to the face of the model in the bottom right, as it is the most detailed element in the composition, with contrasts between the dark shadows on her face and the bright dress. Untitled Film Still number 3 features Sherman stood at a kitchen counter with chores in front of her. Sherman's facial expression gives this image its storytelling, as her looking away from the counter shows that she's either not wanted to do the tasks or is distracted by something else. Her posture with her arm on her front is telling the viewers that she is holding herself back from doing the dishes because she's repulsed by the task. Sherman looking away could also mean that she's desperate for attention from somebody else, possibly hoping they'd notice how she feels towards the chores. To support this, she could be making physical eye contact with somebody across the room. This shows the viewers that she could be there not by choice. To sum it up, the overall image demonstrates disdain for domestic servitude. The technical elements used in this piece include most notably leading lines, which are made up by the model's pose and shadows. These help give the main element, Sherman's face, more attention, as the lines are all directing the viewer from any point of the composition towards it. This piece deliberately breaks the headroom rule, with her face a little out of frame, as there are other elements of the piece that are just as important as the face. For instance, she wants to highlight the kitchen work and capture clearly the relationship she has with chores, hinting at gender inequality. The positioning of the saucepan at the front, with its handle pointing at Sherman, takes up a large portion of the frame, making it stand out. Depth of field is also used within the saucepan, hiding some of its detail, which keeps it from receiving more attention than the model's face. The lower third of the piece contains detail within the busy worktop, and it contrasts with the clear white spaces in the upper section. Sherman has used all these elements to show the viewer exactly how the model is feeling in the environment that she's in, and this is consistent all throughout the 69 pictures in her Untitled Film Still series, and even all her other works since the early days.